A few years ago, a very specific promise started floating around boardrooms. Soon, software would mostly write itself.
The Builder AI used that wisdom to create a product that quickly went from 0 to 1.5 billion, then back to 0 again. And on the website, they say, we make building an app so easy that even a caveman can do it. The way it works is that you prompt it just like ChatGPT, then a professional human-powered vibe coder steps in to fix all the slop. It's the perfect platform for people not talented enough to vibe code.
Executives heard code is just typing. Investors heard labor is the biggest cost. And the loudest headlines turned that into a countdown. The implication was simple and cinematic. Developers would be swapped out the way companies swap out tools. Then reality showed up, with logs, edge cases, and angry customers. Because here's what actually happened. The best companies didn't stop using developers. They started using AI inside development, and then discovered that writing code was never the part that made software hard. At Google, CEO Sundar Pichai said that more than a quarter of new code is generated by AI and then reviewed and accepted by engineers.
We're also using AI internally to improve our coding processes, which is boosting productivity and efficiency. Today, more than a quarter of all new code at Google is generated by AI, then reviewed and accepted by engineers. This helps our engineers do more and move faster.
That's not a story about replacing humans. That's a story about moving humans to the highest leverage part of the process, deciding what should exist, what must never break, and what absolutely can ship with a quiet flaw that becomes a loud incident later. At Microsoft, CEO Satya Nadella said around 20% to 30% of code in some repositories is written by software.
The PR, by the way, code reviews are very high. So in fact, the agents we have for reviewing code, that usage is increased. And so I'd say maybe 20–30% of the code that is inside of our repos today in some of our projects are probably all written by software. What about you guys?
Meaning AI, again, with humans still accountable for the product. Those two facts are the heart of what went wrong with the replace developers dream. AI is being used heavily, and developers are still there, sometimes more essential than before, because the last mile of software is where the danger lives. The easiest way to understand this is to picture a factory that suddenly gets a robot arm that can assemble parts faster than any human. Everyone celebrates. Then you run the factory at full speed and you discover the real bottlenecks weren't hands. They were quality control, supply chain tolerances, safety checks, and the fact that one incorrect bolt can ruin a whole production run. AI coding tools are the robot arm. They can generate code quickly. They can also generate mistakes quickly. And when you scale mistakes, you don't get a little more debugging. You get a new category of risk. The productivity story is the most confusing part because it's not one story. It's two stories that are both true. In controlled experiments, AI can be a rocket booster. A well-known GitHub Copilot study found that developers with Copilot completed a specific task much faster than those without it. 55.8% faster in that experiment.
We found that the group that used Copilot completed the task 55% faster. So that was a pretty, it meant that less than half the time that it took the group that was not using Copilot to complete the same task.
That's real. It's also a very particular scenario. A defined task, a clean starting point, a narrow goal, and a world where finishing is measurable in minutes. But enterprise software doesn't live in that world. Enterprise software lives in a world of half-documented legacy systems, invisible business rules, compliance requirements that change mid-sprint, and architectures where a tiny change in one place creates a weird failure in another place 3 weeks later. And in that world, another set of results shows up, results that sound like heresy if you've only heard the hype. A randomized controlled trial by METR, Model Evaluation and Threat Research, found that experienced open source developers took 19% longer to complete tasks when they were allowed to use early 2025 AI tools than when they weren't. Let that sink in. Not AI didn't help. AI slowed them down. Why? Because the time didn't disappear. It moved. When experienced engineers use AI, they often spend less time typing and more time doing the expensive part, verifying. The AI suggestion looks plausible, but plausible is not the same as correct in this code base. with these constraints, under these load patterns, with these security assumptions. So the engineer becomes a professional skeptic. They test, they recheck, they run the suite, they scan for weird side effects, they rewrite the part that's almost right, because almost right is how outages are born. This is where the replacement narrative starts collapsing. If AI produces code, you still need someone to own the consequences of that code. And the better your software is, more users, more money moving through it, more integrations, more dependencies, the more the consequences matter. So companies tried the AI-first idea in real production settings and discovered a paradox. The tool that makes the first draft fast can make the final draft slower. Because the final draft is not the same job as the first draft. The final draft is where you pay for correctness. Now layer in security and the story gets sharper. Security isn't just about whether code runs, it's about whether code can be abused. In a study titled, "Do Users Write More Insecure Code with AI Assistance?" participants with access to an AI assistant produced insecure solutions more often than those without access in 4 out of 5 tasks. And they were more likely to believe their insecure code was secure. That second part is quietly terrifying, overconfidence. Because the worst security posture isn't, "we know we're vulnerable." The worst security posture is, "we think we're fine." And security teams are now seeing this collide with real operations. A 2026 report from Aikido, surveying 450 security leaders, developers, and AppSec engineers across the US and Europe, reported that 1 in 5 suffered a serious incident linked to AI code. That's not a theoretical warning, that's a scoreboard. Then comes the quality problem. Even when AI code isn't insecure, it can be messy in ways that inflate long-term cost. CodeRabbit analyzed 470 open-source pull requests and reported that AI co-authored PRS produced 10.83 issues per PR versus 6.45 for human-only PRS, about 1.7 times more issues, with severity also trending worse. Again, notice the theme. The cost doesn't vanish, it relocates. Instead of paying developers to write code, you pay developers and reviewers and security engineers to untangle code, assess risk, and keep the product stable. This is why so many will shrink engineering plans quietly reverse. Not because AI can't generate code, it can, but because code generation is not the same as software engineering. Software engineering includes understanding requirements that are incomplete on purpose because the business itself is figuring them out. Knowing when a clean solution will break a legacy integration that a customer still depends on. Understanding that performance isn't a feature you bolt on later, it's shaped by early design decisions. Recognizing that a small change to a payment flow can trigger legal, tax, fraud, and compliance ripple effects. And doing the human part that AI still struggles with. Asking the right questions when the prompt is missing critical context. In enterprise reality, prompts are always missing context. That's not user error. That's how business works. Most organizations don't have perfect specs. They have conversations, shifting priorities, undocumented tribal knowledge, and requirements that change because the market changes. AI doesn't naturally pause and say, "Before I implement this, what happens when the customer refunds after 31 days in a jurisdiction with a different tax rule, while a partial shipment is in transit and the fraud model flags the transaction?" A senior engineer asks that question because they've been burned before. They've seen the support tickets. They've seen the edge cases that only appear on holidays, at scale, in production, with real money on the line. So when a company says, "We'll replace developers," what they often mean, without realizing it, is, "We'll replace the people who prevent the expensive surprises." And expensive surprises don't disappear, they compound. That's why a lot of AI-driven development has drifted toward a more honest model. AI is an accelerator, not a replacement, but not everyone learned it gently. One cautionary tale that keeps coming up is Builder.ai, a company that marketed AI-powered app building at enormous scale, and then collapsed into insolvency after financial and operational turmoil. Regardless of the exact internal mix of automation and human labor over time, the public lesson was brutal. If your business story is AI replaces expertise, you better have reality that survives audits, customers, and cash flow. Because the market eventually asks a simple question: does it work reliably? If the answer is sometimes, you don't have magic, you have risk, and risk is expensive. So what does going horribly wrong actually look like in practical terms? It looks like this. A team rolls out an AI coding assistant. Early demos are incredible. Boilerplate appears instantly. Developers feel faster. Leaders feel like they found a cheat code. Then the second-order effects arrive. Pull requests get bigger because it's easy to generate more code than necessary. Reviews take longer because reviewers must verify not just logic, but hidden assumptions. Testing becomes the bottleneck because more code means more surface area for failure. Security teams get dragged in late because AI-generated patterns can repeat insecure defaults at scale. And when something breaks, blame becomes weird. The developer didn't write the code, the AI didn't own the code, and leadership still wants a name attached to the incident report. This is why the healthiest companies are adapting in a very specific way. They're not trying to delete developers from the org chart. They're trying to redesign the development pipeline so AI can't silently create chaos. That redesign usually includes a few non-negotiables. First, they define what AI is allowed to touch. Low-risk internal tools? Fine. Core payment systems? Much stricter. Second, they raise the bar on tests. If AI increases code output, test coverage and automated checks have to scale with it. Or you're just accelerating toward a cliff. Third, they enforce secure defaults. Linting, dependency scanning, secret detection, and security review can't be optional when code is being produced quickly. Fourth, they treat prompts like specifications. If developers are going to program in English, then clarity becomes a technical skill. Ambiguous prompts create ambiguous systems. Fifth, they keep senior engineers in the loop, not to type faster, but to set architecture, define interfaces, and prevent the quiet design mistakes that become loud disasters later. In other words, AI changes the shape of the work. It doesn't erase the work. If you want the cleanest, most honest takeaway, it's this. AI is getting good at generating code. Humans are still better at engineering systems, and the more valuable the system is, the more that difference matters. So replacing developers with AI didn't go wrong because AI is useless. It went wrong because many leaders misunderstood what developers actually do. Developers don't get paid for typing, they get paid for judgment. They get paid for anticipating what breaks. They get paid for shipping something that keeps working after it ships. AI can help them do that, sometimes a lot, but the moment you confuse help with replace, you discover the hidden cost. The work you removed was the work that kept the product safe. And once you learn that lesson the hard way, you usually end up doing what the best teams are doing right now, hiring developers who can think like engineers and giving them AI tools that behave like accelerators, not autopilots. If you had to trust one thing to AI today, writing the first draft of code or reviewing it for security, what would you pick and why? At Machine Minds, your opinion matters to us, so please feel free to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments section below.